Hello, viewers, and welcome to the latest episode of the Huddle. Tim Poole here, editor of Gaming Insider and Gaming America, and I'm with Sue Page, CEO Americas of Neosurf. Sue, thanks for joining us.
Nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
Looking forward to talking to you about all things North America, all things payments and gambling. We've had Andrea McGeechan, Global CEO, on the Huddle a few times. Always a pleasure to speak with her. But it's great to have you on to kind of get the North America's perspective from you as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So an easy starter, I guess, for you, how's life at Neosurf, and as I say, with an emphasis on the Americas operations?
Well, I suppose interesting right now. It's almost like a startup mode for me because we're in launch position in both Mexico and the US, and so even though we're 20 plus years old, we have a bit of a startup vibe about us. We're in expansion mode. We're launching new products. There's been some restructuring, so there's a lot of high energy, and we're a small company, so we have to be smart and we have to be flexible in our approach, and then that means that priorities can shift quickly, and we need to be able to communicate that to the team, so to make sure that they're fully on board and understand where we're going. So it's never a dull moment is probably the best description right now.
Sure. What are the pluses and minuses of that? Because I would imagine, I guess if you're working on a smaller scale, maybe slightly less in terms of resources, but at the same time, the advantage of perhaps being more nimble and moving quicker.
Yeah, and they counterbalance each other, don't they? I mean, you've absolutely nailed it. Resource is always a challenge, and that means from a leadership perspective, then we've got to be flexible. And we've got to make decisions sometimes on the fly as to where those priorities sit, and look at what's best for the overall organization, which then can sometimes mean, certainly from my perspective, does that mean that a launch gets pushed back or stand aside and let another priority take place? So there's a constant juggling.
Mm-hmm. So we'll zone in on kind of US and Mexico, as you mentioned, but I wanted to talk a little bit about your journey as well, because quite relevant recently, and certainly in what some of our publications we've been discussing the merits of kind of hiring external talent, and you've been in this industry for a couple of years now, but your initial journey is very much kind of non-gaming. So walk us through that journey and how you've ended up at a company that essentially kind of intersects in a few different verticals, but certainly payments and gambling.
Right. It's definitely not a journey I anticipated. So my background is retail, and delivering great consumer journeys and experiences, and so very much kind of a customer first approach. And I've been lucky enough to work with pretty much all of the world's top retailers over the last 20, I suppose 30 years now, showing my age, and providing them with e-com and on-demand solutions. But I think the specialty for me is that it's taking something and repackaging it and rebrand, create something unique for that particular retailer and their specific demographic. So really, what I love is I'm an implementer. I love being able to take something from concept to delivery and be fully involved in that process. So I'm drawn to industries or partnerships and relationships where I can work to help create customer solutions that have meaningful impacts on their consumers. So really that kind of product knowledge, product implication, retail, I think it brings my strength to this role. And then coupled with that Andrea and I have known each other for a very, very long time. I mean, over 25 years, we worked together in a different lifetime over 25 years ago. In fact, she transferred me to the States, so she owes me. She sent me out here on a 2-year deal, and 20 years later, I'm still here. So having that opportunity to come back and work for her and support her in this role at Neosurf, it was like the planets were aligning. Everything kind of fell into place, and that was a big part of the attraction for me, because we are a fantastic team and we complement each other and we challenge each other. But probably most importantly, we have a really good laugh along the way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, fantastic. Couple of interesting points. If you don't mind, I'd like to maybe I'll kind of get you to expand on. In terms of the retail world, what were the kind of biggest lessons you took from that? And also when you're sort of moving to the US from Europe, I mean, I'm sure there's notable differences, but from on the top of your head, what's the kind of the biggest difference been for you?
My husband and I have a motto that we still use today. It's not wrong, it's just different. But that is actually a really good question, Tim, because I've worked with a number of companies that have tried to expand from the UK and come into the US market. And if they don't do their due diligence and their homework and look at this market differently, then they're pretty much destined to fail, because you can be hugely successful in the UK and then we speak the same language, but the consumer is very different no matter what industry. And then for me, that then applied to the different retailers I was working with. So for example, if you look at, working with a Tesco in the UK and then coming over and working with Walmart or Walgreens here, where Walgreens acquired Boots, but they're still very, very different companies, and how they approach their consumers are very different. I'm lucky enough to have spent a long time working with Costco and their team, and they're someone that puts their members above everything else. So just working with those individual retailers and seeing how differently they view their customers, their customer journey, what their value statements are and their principles are. There's more than one way to skin a cat, and it's very interesting to go when you get underneath those underneath the initial layers from what the consumer sees to actually see what makes them tick underneath.
Yeah, really interesting, and this industry effectively backs that up, because we obviously saw an influx of operators who have all since left the market, and the top operators at the moment are the not homegrown, but the ones that have put kind of US customer first.
You have to. I mean, I think there's an arrogance if you don't, right?
Yeah, absolutely, and I think well, digressing slightly, but when you look at kind of FanDuel and DraftKings, for example, FanDuel is owned by Flutter, which was Ireland and UK, but I think they've managed a transition of now they primarily listed in the US, so they're demonstrating what you're saying, and that they didn't come in and say, we're going to show you how to do things. They very much embraced it and now kind of lead the market as a result. But yeah, slight digression there, but kind of I mean, kind of these truths apply, across
they
industries.
Absolutely
really,
do. And so for me, when I look at any of these operators, it's like they're a retailer that has a consumer, right? I mean, it's just it's a different product, but we're always selling something.
Yeah, absolutely. And a nice segue into your role as CEO Americas, your day-to-day duties. Obviously, you mentioned Andrea. How might what you've already kind of touched on kind of the scale and kind of the startup culture, but how might your duties and your aims maybe differ from what Andrea's looking at as a kind of a global side?
Yeah, I mean, so my focus is obviously solely on the Americas. We've been active and live in Canada for some years now, so that sort of is not a primary focus right now. It's Mexico and the US, although we do have our PAA that we have to deal with in Canada as well. But it's all about Mexico and the US and market entry. So we launched in Mexico this year. We're in soft launch, or beta, as they like to say over here, in the US. So for me right now, a day-to-day is full on launch mode. So it's not quite crisis management, but it's it's getting into those kind of daily stand-ups. And when as an organization, we have team members over 4 or 5 different countries. So it's pulling all of them together, and we're so much more than just a payments company. It's compliance and tech and onboarding and finance and all of these pieces that have to be ready. So really for me, it's kind of boots on the ground. Whereas Andrea's remit is obviously much broader and far more mature. She's the group CEO. So in addition to supporting me, she's also focusing on our global position, overseeing other new market entries. So she's scaling where I'm still kind of like digging out the trenches, as it were.
Sure. And if we're to look at products, your wager wallet, which is something in the upcoming Gaming America magazine. So we've got a piece from yourself, which kind of articulated very well, what the product is. Talked about the launch. If you could do your best to maybe tell the viewers here, it kind of in video format as well, kind of tell us all about it.
Really, it's been a labor of love, and going back to what I just said about being able to implement and take something from concept to delivery. And it started with the very honest roots of looking at how do we localize what we have, talking about bringing something in that's already been successful in other parts of the company, and then bringing that into launching into the US market. So how do we take our core offering, which was a wallet, and with the cash vouchers in the UK and Europe, and take that and then align that with player behavior, operator needs, regulatory expectations, and so on. And really the light bulb moment for me was at an XDIO event couple of years ago, where RG was very much the focus, and the agenda was full of responsible gaming, and there was a lot of discussion about the newer tools that the operators had started to implement, and whether these were player friendly, and how the player, or was the player connecting with them at all. And that really planted a seed for me in that we already had some of these tools in place. We already had kind of wallets within the limit and some other tools that were kind of at the back end. So the thought process is, why can't we put them to the front of this and actually give those tools to the players? And that's when we got into the research, and went and talked directly to the players. And again, going back to why it's so important to do due diligence in the marketplace. And I got to sit down with some of these players, and that was it was just eye-opening to me, and so valuable, because I'm not from this industry. So to actually get to sit in a room where there were VIP players on FanDuel and DraftKings and whatever. But it really opened my eyes to who they are as individuals, and then how they view sports betting, what's frustrating to them, what's important to them, especially when it comes to RG and budgeting. And so then we took that amazing data and we created tools based on that research. So the players want budgeting tools. They view sports betting as entertainment, right? It's something that they do as a group. They do it with their friends. They have a budget for it, in the same way that I might budget concert tickets or going out for dinner. And they want to be able to have intelligent tools that sit within the part of the play process, rather than having to go off and set something somewhere and then I'm doing that at individual operators. And responsible gaming is important. They want to play, they want to be able to afford to play, and they want to be able to control that, and they want to be able to track what they're doing across all the operators, set limits across all the operators, and just have tools that are part of that flow. We took the wallet and built these tools in. So it'll depend on how many operators we have that implement our wallet, but that player can then limit their spend over, that we know that they work with 3 or 4 operators at a time, they play on 3 or 4 operators. So they can then set their budget limit for a week, a month, whatever, as there's flexible tools. So they have that single point of control within that wager wallet. That's for all of their betting, spending, and budgeting. And so we wanted to improve that player experience, empower them, take their view of setting a limit. I know I work with some of the key voices in the RG space. Say, okay, what do we do? If a player sets a limit and then they want to go back and change it, what do we do with that? And they're like, well, you take them at their word. They set that limit for a reason. So we keep the limits in place, and then we remind them and we refresh, and we just keep RG tools very close within the interface. So if they are feeling like they're struggling, they can access those. But we just become, I think, so much more than just the transaction. We become a place where they can control everything. They can download their P&L. They can see what they're doing across all operators. So the goal is that we've improved the player experience, but while also lowering costs for the operators and providing better tools for the operators as well. So it's more than just a wallet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that makes total sense, and I imagine that player feedback that you detailed there, was pretty invaluable, because recently it's got the height of Q2 season at the moment, and there's a lot of theory in business, a lot of topics that we'll discuss and other people will talk about on a day-to-day basis, but ultimately it comes down to what the customer is doing, and you actually see that in these conference calls. You have kind of CEOs of multi-billion-pound organizations, but they're talking about, we did this in this shop and we did this on our app, and that ultimately that is kind of everything.
Yeah, and it still amazes me how many decisions made in the boardroom without actually going down and putting boots on the ground and seeing what's going on. But what came back loud and clear is that if you screw up the payment experience, then that brand has most likely lost a customer, right? Because that negative experience is associated with the brand. The player doesn't think, oh, it's my bank that blocked that transaction. They think it's FanDuel that did it. So they're going to go elsewhere. So it's how do we improve that and treat them as grown-ups. I mean, I think it was just every single person that we spoke to said that responsible gaming was, a 10 out of 10 important to them. But their definition of that, right? They don't see themselves as a problem gambler. And I think a lot of the messaging, I mean, this is a while back now, we did the research, and I know there's been a move to kind of change some of the language that we're using, which is definitely a positive thing, but they didn't see themselves as having a problem, therefore I'm not using the tools. Also, I don't want to have to go out of the realm of play to go and set a limit. So the bet starts with the deposit, right? It starts at the payment. I'm making that decision when I'm depositing to the operator, therefore put those tools as part of that journey. It becomes far more intuitive.
Yeah, I think that's a crucial point, and that's something that we've also kind of covered in discussions with we've got the Responsible Online Gaming Association in the US, that they've talked about the messaging shouldn't be problem gambling, it should be responsible gaming, because then you're encompassing everyone rather than, exactly as you said, people they might think, well, I don't have a problem, so I don't need to do this. Right. So I think that does hit the nail on the head, really.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in terms of we've mentioned a couple of, let's say, I want to talk about a topic that's a favorite of Andrea's, perhaps, as a way of saying it. She's often talked about togetherness within the industry, and that has that chimed in with a couple of points that you made already as well, in terms of it's more than just a wallet. For example, the wager wallet, it's it's not transactional, and so Andrea's often emphasized kind of regulators, operators, and suppliers working together ultimately to, and that's the only way to really improve things. In terms of actually just that as a topic, well, maybe your 2 cents on that, just to kind of just open it up to not too specific of a question.
No, I mean, it's her and I will be very closely aligned on this, and I think we always talk about what we can do better as an industry or what you change as an industry, and collaboration always comes up as the thing, right? We need to collaborate more.
Yeah.
So if we can be more together, and if you think about the player journey, how many different companies are involved? How many different pieces of tech are involved within that one bet? And even when you look at, within some of the operators, some of the departments are still siloed. So they're not looking at each other's data and information. So how do we take that and improve and make it a safer place for the players and also more sustainable for everybody? So, when I look at Wager Wallet, obviously our power will come with the more operators that we're integrated with, because then we have a unique view, because we can see what the player is doing with the funds when they come out of the operator, right? So if I receive a payout from the operator to the wallet, I can then tell operator A, well, actually Sue took 50% of that and she withdrew it to her bank account, but the other 50% went to operator B. You can see player behavior. We can also, if we're sharing information such as self-exclusion, for example, and supporting responsible gaming, could we not then also apply that to bad actors, right, and have another exclusion in this? So I think there's many different ways that we can look at this, but we need to come at it from a more cohesive unit. Regulation is changing all the time, and it's sometimes it's difficult to keep up with. But we have this incredible technology and data and the use of AI coming in. Is that if we have a much more cohesive end-to-end solution, then that can only be more success for us all, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. A few interesting touch points there, and if we're to bear them in mind, and kind of everything we've talked about, and products and launches, and your remit in kind of Mexico and the US, if we're looking at I'd say second half of the year, but we're already quite into that, looking at Q4 and heading into 2026, your main goals on kind of the Americas side, what are they?
Product. Launch the product. It's full on product mode. So we want to get out there, and there's all, we've got SBC and G2E and ISIL coming up. So we'll be there at all of those, and as with most launches, we'll have a phased approach. So we'll be looking at feature releases over the first quarter or so, and then you switch from launch to engagement. And how do we work with acquisition, both on our side with the operators, but also with the consumer, with the players. And we have a very interesting model or role, as it were, because our customers are the consumer, the player, because they're a wallet customer, but also the operators, and then we also have the relationship with our resellers. So it's really kind of like a tri-party, and how do we bring that together and to build success? But certainly I would hope that we would be sat here in a year's time, Tim, and I'd say we've had a successful launch, and we've got a number of major operators using Wager Wallet, and I think also most importantly to me that product has resonated with the players, and that we've given something valuable to the market. I mean, we're listen, I'm under no illusion, we're a small company. I'm not we can be disruptive, but I'm not going to be doing it in a major way. But I think there is an opportunity to be disruptive and to provide something that some of the bigger players, quite honestly, won't focus on, because it's not necessarily within their business interest to do so, right? There's to what you said earlier, there's a beauty about being a smaller organization where we can create something specific for this industry, because I'm not focusing on other markets, right? I'm looking purely at sports betting in the US, and I think that's where our strength comes.
Mm-hmm. Well, we'll definitely in a year's time catch up, and we'll reflect on, or maybe sooner than that, but we'll reflect on kind of the progress that you've made. Certainly plenty on the to-do list, and as you say, we've got a few busy shows coming up. But best of luck for Q4 and a tiny bit of Q3 left.
Yeah.
Thanks for your time today. Really enjoyed speaking with you.
You too. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks, and to all our viewers as well. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.